is open to Delawareans who either live in a disproportionately affected area or have either been convicted of a marijuana-related offense or are the children of a person convicted of a marijuana-related offense. Half of the first round of retail licenses, 2 testing licenses, and a third of the cultivation and manufacturing licenses will be awarded to the pool of social equity license applicants. In addition, the bill includes a handful of other provisions to give social equity applicants a leg up in competing with big multi-state operators, such as discounted fees, waivers, and technical assistance. The bill also creates a special license pool for Delaware-owned marijuana micro businesses in cultivation and manufacturing. Think of these businesses as the craft growers of Delaware's marijuana industry, such as like Dogfish versus the Budweiser. This micro business provision ensures that local small businesses have an opportunity to grow and thrive in Delaware, and this new industry isn't dominated by big corporate entities. A few additional details about enforcement and use of marijuana. Enforcement would be handled by the Division of Alcohol and Tobacco Enforcement through a new Office of Marijuana Control Commissioner. This will reduce duplication of services and reduce startup costs. HB305 would not change existing state law regarding driving under the influence of an illicit or recreational drug. It also would not allow individuals to grow their own plants. Public consumption of marijuana would still be illegal. Employer enforcement largely would not change. Employers would be permitted to drug test workers for marijuana to ensure any zero tolerance policies are being followed, as well as prohibit the consumption of marijuana at work. No longer would a person in legal possession of marijuana be considered a person prohibited from owning and possessing a firearm. I'll tell you that some of the changes that we've added to this year's bill compared to last year's HB 150. We've included several amendments, one strengthening the requirements of testing facilities so they achieve accreditation. Another that addresses the Department of Agriculture to maintain communication regarding the cultivation of hemp and marijuana. We've also included an amendment that removes the provisions relating to employers. We've included the amendment that requires stricter packaging and labeling requirements. And we removed the requirement of a project labor agreement on new facilities. Also, we've added the requirement of a comprehensive business plan to the competitive scoring criteria for a license. We've also added a part to the social equity portion of the bill, which directs 7% of the marijuana tax revenue to a justice reinvestment fund. This fund shall be administered by the Department of Justice and will be used to administer grants, contracts, services, and initiatives which will focus on criminal justice improvements, restorative justice, jail diversion, workforce development, industry-specific technical assistance, or monitoring services for economically disadvantaged persons and disproportionately impacted areas. This fund can also address the underlying cause of crime, reduce drug-related arrests, and reduce the prison population in the state. It also will address creating and developing technology to assist with the restoration of civil rights and the expungement of criminal records. This new version also removes expungement provisions as they were rendered duplicative by the enactment of Senate Bills 111 and 112. Now, you will also hear from several state agencies today that we received a list of concerns from the governor's office yesterday around 4 p.m. And we were told that several state agencies will be on today to address some concerns. I want to reassure you that we have met in the past with these agencies, and we will continue to meet with them to address these concerns. I feel many of these concerns were talked about and addressed last year, and many of them will also be addressed through the requirement of the new commissioner to promulgate regulations. And I hope these agencies take part in that process. Similar issues have been raised, such as the Department of Agriculture has had concerns. We've added language in the bill through one of the amendments that was adopted in this new draft to ensure that the commissioner is required to communicate with the Department of Agriculture in the decision of any location of indoor or outdoor grows. We've also will always consider the testing of any of this product to be of the highest requirements to protect the public. And that would be for indoor and outdoor grow. So I've also just addressed with my legislative aide that tomorrow we'll send out requests for meetings with all the agencies that have a concern, so we can meet with them over the 4-week break at the JFC. So I guess that's all I have to present at this time. I will take questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. First, just house cleaning here. I want to get Representatives Shoup and Collins marked present. And you guys don't need to do anything. I'm just acknowledging that you were marked present. Quickly to Representative Osinski, I want to express my appreciation for your commitment to this. This has been, I know you've been nothing if not diligent in meeting with everybody who wants to talk to you about this. And so I know it's been a very extensive process here. So, I think the bill we have here is hopefully what gets it done. I know a lot of us have been supporting this effort for a long time, and I just want to thank you for all your continued work on it, and hopefully we can finally get this done for the people of Delaware. Now move on to other members. I see Representative Baumbach has his hand up.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Osinski. I'd like to echo the Chairman's appreciation, Representative Osinski, for your persistence, for your diligence, for your using your ears and your mouth in the proportion that they are provided to you. You've listened so much to so many concerns, and you've incorporated, you and the staff have incorporated so many of the best ideas there for this matter. I've been pleased to be a co-prime sponsor of this legislation for years. There was a forum many years ago the governor had called, and there was an opponent who raised the issue of gateway drugs and access to youth, and there was a third issue. And at the end, there was a proponent who got up to speak and said, well, we agree with you. All of those are problems. What are you doing about it? Because not doing anything does not address the gateway. This bill does. Not addressing the diversion is something that doing nothing does nothing about. This bill does. So I always, when I talk about this bill, I never say this is a marijuana legalization. I say this is a marijuana legalization, taxation, and regulation. And I think a regulated cannabis market in Delaware is a far safer environment and is very good public policy. And I thank you for bringing this forward.
Are there any other comments or questions from committee members?
Mr. Chairman, this is Charles Postles. I'm having trouble activating my raised hand, so at some point I'd like to make some comments.
Go ahead, Representative.
Okay, thank you. While there are many aspects around the issue of marijuana, I don't believe either extreme, that of legalization or of excessive punitiveness, provides the proper response. I believe education, prevention, treatment, and fair and effective criminal justice programs are a better solution. We could dialogue about economics, the fees that would be collected, how they would be distributed, all of the infrastructure that may be necessary for that, even the long-term social costs that are involved. We could talk about impairment and workplace safety, the liability that business owners may incur. There are several other issues that we could talk about. What I really want to talk about is the personal health, particularly of our youth and our young adults. It's been proven that the use of recreational marijuana with the high THC content has permanent detrimental effects on brain development for those up to age 25, 26, 27 years old. I've even had proponents of the legalization effort in my office concurring and agreeing that there is this aspect of permanent brain damage or development impairment. My question would be, why, pardon me, why would we want to saddle our kids and our grandkids and limit their potential, their lifelong earnings even, by exposing them to this harmful drug that would impair their brain development? To me, that eclipses all the other discussion we can have. I would agree with that. Certainly some criminal justice issues that I think need desperate discussion. But the thing that really equips that is, why would we do harm to our young people by allowing use of this drug? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. I have Representative Chicocha next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take the opportunity to express first my thanks to Representative Osinski. I had a lot of concerns with the bill initially, just in terms of the negative side of marijuana, that the side that many don't equate with the drug itself, but truly with the after effects and the violence related to the drug market inside of my community, and just our war on drugs and the impact that the legal market of marijuana has had on communities such as various parts of the first district in the city of Wilmington and other parts of our state. Initially looking at the bill, I seen very little redress. You know, we spoke about the harms and communities being 4 times, and individuals who look like me 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana offenses, but we didn't really see redress inside of the bill. And I am extremely thankful to Representative Osinski. He listened and really sought to create a meaningful working group that sought to address this concern. I think that the Justice Reinvestment Fund is a great way, a great opportunity to address some of these harms that have been longstanding in communities. That Representative Postal's just mentioned education, and having this fund to be able to support education and other programs, just drug awareness inside of these various communities that have been harmed, to provide opportunities to build partnerships and alliances, to truly build safeguards for communities that have just been devastated by this very staple illegal drug for forever. And now all of a sudden there's this legal market, and that same market being able to replenish and being able to provide some hope, some awareness, and just a new direction, a new sense of engagement within our communities. I believe the Department of Justice will be great stewards to oversee this fund and to work with our communities, our nonprofit partners, and our faith-based community, any organization that truly wants to be of assistance. In particular, I'm thinking of education and awareness programs inside of our schools and community centers that truly show our children and those who we know are most vulnerable the opportunity that this fund creates is just limitless to me. I'm thankful for its inclusion, and I truly believe that it can have the opportunity to repair some of the harm that has been longstanding in communities such as the First District. I'm a proud supporter of this new initiative. I really think it makes sense for our communities, our state, to be able to generate revenue and tax income off of the sale of marijuana, the legal sale of marijuana, that and then to reinvest it into our state, reinvest it into communities such as throughout the First District that have been harmed. So I just wanted to state that. And again, I really think that this is a quality attempt. And as has been said about Representative Olszynski, listening to the voices that had issues with the bill as it had been presented, and then ensuring that those voices were recognized and included in this latest edition of the bill. I'm very grateful, and I can really see the great benefit that it will have for areas of our many areas of our state, in particular areas like the one that I represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Morrison.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Bentz. I just wanted to briefly respond to what Representative Postles was saying. We know that the negative social and health impacts of alcohol use and abuse and tobacco usage are much worse than any negative social and health impacts related to cannabis usage. And this is personal to me since, as some of you know, I am an alcoholic who has been sober for 17 years, and I've been tobacco-free for over 7 years. So given this, and given that we know that prohibition simply doesn't work, following Representative Postal's logic, tobacco products in Delaware and also alcohol in Delaware, selling those things should also be outlawed. And I'm strongly suspecting that's not something that he supports. So the logic there of Representative Postal's just really in the end does not pan out.
Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't expect that anybody will change their mind based on what I say. The government, though, has a tremendous influence on many of our citizens. I'll give you an example from many years ago, back when cigarette smoking was far more prevalent than it is today. I was a member of an organization, and I will say it was not a religious organization. It was a business type of thing. And they would have conventions with like 25,000 people showing up. And they simply made it be known that the philosophy of the organization was, it wasn't a rule, it just suggested that people shouldn't smoke. You know what the result was? 25,000 people, nobody smoked. It was not a rule, it was just a suggestion. Well, what we're talking about here is a government, and keep in mind, in regards to legalities, and we already have civil penalties for possession. We already have medical marijuana. Nobody's going to jail or has any threat of going to jail over marijuana unless they're involved in other sales of other drugs. So we're talking about the government telling our young people, this stuff is fine, go to it. I don't think it's the intent of anybody here, but you cannot tell me that thousands of our kids are going to say, even though I know there are age limits in the bill, but it's going to be like the get out of jail free card. Let's all go do it. The government says it's just fine. I think we can do better than that. I really do. And I do not think, given the fact that drug deaths, overdose deaths are skyrocketing every year, I just don't think it's, I think we need to step back and think about what we're doing to our young people. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from committee members?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to follow up before you open it to public comment. I appreciate Representative Postal's and Representative Collins's remarks, but I feel like I do have to address that the way they envision this would be keeping the illegal enterprise that contributes or provides this product to the many Delawareans that are consuming it. And this illegal enterprise brings violence to so many communities. There are shootings. There are the funding and the revenue from this illegal enterprise also funds other illegal enterprises. This harms our children. The illegal market does not request ID for proof of age, where this bill will require that. So it will help eliminate the minors that are receiving this. So I understand what they're saying and I understand what their concern is, but I do think this legislation addresses the harm to our young adults that are going on now through the existence of a continuing and growing illegal enterprise. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Osinski. And if there's no more questions or comments from committee members, we will now begin the public comment portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, if you'd like to provide public comment, please utilize the raise hand function. We will be cutting off at 1:30 or promptly before that so that we have time for a vote as well. Mark Jacobs, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz and committee members for this opportunity. My name is Mark Jacobs. I am a retired software engineer from Lewis. I ask you to vote yes to advance HB305. I could spend my time reiterating the benefits of cannabis legalization or refuting the many falsehoods used by opponents. You will certainly hear both in this hearing. In the end, though, these arguments are superfluous. Cannabis legalization already has the approval of roughly 2/3 of the Delaware electorate in general. It has majority support across the entire political spectrum, left, right, all major parties, and independents. We are a representative democracy, and you, as our representatives, should heed the public opinion when it reaches such a high level of support for a policy. Cannabis prohibition has been costly, misguided, harmful, unjust, and a complete failure. It must be undone. The public knows and accepts this, with a strong majority supporting legalization for adults, even though most do not consume. Please be on the right side of history and support HB 305. And I thank you again.
Thank you. Janine Fishman, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Benson, committee members, I appreciate your time today. My name is Janine Fishman. I'm a resident of Dover, and I'm a disabled visual artist, focusing mainly on photography and photo manipulation when I'm able to. I want to start by saying thank you. I don't know if your job might be a thankless one or not, but on the off chance it is, I wanted to be sure that you know at least one person is grateful for what you do. I'd imagine it's not always easy, but it is very, very necessary. What I'd like to talk about today is HB 305, which intends to legalize recreational cannabis use for adults over 21 in Delaware. I'm a medical cannabis patient here, and I'm grateful that this program exists for people like me, but it's not enough, and not being executed in a way that is always beneficial for the patients. Dispensaries are frequently out of stock, and the prices make them very unattainable for someone in my position. As a chronically ill person, one of the major problems I deal with is chronic pain, and I use cannabis to help me treat it. However, due to my disabilities, I am very low income and usually cannot afford what's available. Since the few dispensaries here have such a monopoly on things, they are able to charge whatever they want because they know people have no other choice. I am usually only able to buy a small amount once or twice a month, and it's just not enough to consistently help me. If we're able to pass HB 305, there will be more competition and pricing will follow suit, making it much more accessible to those who rely on it to benefit their lives in whatever meaningful way. Your vote to pass HB 305 will help so many people, and I'll be among those who will be eternally grateful for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Laura Shearer, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz and members of the committee. My name is Laura Scherer. I live in Wilmington. I am the Executive Director of Delaware NORML and a proud advocate for our local cannabis community. I ask you to please vote yes to release House Bill 305 from this committee. Adult use cannabis legalization is a matter of justice. Cannabis prohibition is a failed, costly policy that diverts law enforcement resources away from serious crime and puts an unnecessary strain on our criminal justice system. In addition to the monetary cost associated with enforcement, cannabis prohibition comes with an unjustifiable human cost. Passage of this legislation, House Bill 305, will protect over 150,000 Delaware adult cannabis consumers like me from arrest, civil citation, seizure of property and currency, and the threat, stigma of a lifelong criminal consequences of being subjected to the criminal justice system. Legalizing cannabis is more than just allowing recreational use or the money that can be made. It's about undoing a century of racist policy that disproportionately target our Black and Latino communities. It's about rebuilding the communities that have suffered the most harm. And it's about ensuring that everyone has access to the opportunities that this legal cannabis market will provide. With House Bill 305, we have a chance to implement cannabis policy focused on public health and equity. A century of trying to arrest our way to a solution has failed. The legalization of cannabis possession, the creation of a regulated market, the provisions of the Justice Reinvestment Fund will begin to process of reversing decades of discriminatory, harmful, and fundamentally unfair cannabis laws. It's time for Delaware to become a leader in equitable cannabis policy and end this failed prohibition that continues to exist as a tool to perpetuate systematic racism by targeting and devastating already marginalized communities in our state. For these reasons, I strongly urge you to vote yes on House Bill 305, both today and when it comes before you again in the full House chamber. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Dawn Lentz, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Dawn Lentz. You
I
need to unmute.
apologize. Let's play a game, committee members. We're going to pretend that you have a disease in your brain. This disease is terminal and degenerative. Your brain is literally shrinking. Now we're going to imagine that you read about a study in Israel where cannabis was able to regenerate damaged brain cells in lab rats. This makes you really hopeful. Maybe you aren't going to die after all. Oh, wait. Your disability is rare. It's not covered under the medical marijuana legalization in Delaware. You can jump through hoops to try to get medical marijuana, but even if that happens, your income is only about $600 a month. You won't be able to afford the medicine that might save you. Your only hope is that if cannabis is legalized in Delaware, maybe that will create a competitive market so that you might be able to afford the medicine that you so desperately need. I don't need to imagine because this is my life. You have been imagining what it's like to be me. I have spinocerebellar ataxia type 2. Please legalize cannabis for adult use. My future depends on it. My name is Dawn Lentz, and I live in Townsend, Delaware. Thank you.
Thank you. Alana Mosick, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you to Chairman Bentz and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Division of Public Health regarding HB 305.
My apologies for that. I hit the wrong button.
HB 305 establishes a low licensure fee for recreational marijuana establishments as compared with that of compassion centers in Delaware's medical marijuana program. The medical marijuana regulations require compassion centers and safety compliance facilities to pay a $40,000 certification fee for their license every 2 years. HB 305 only requires marijuana retail stores, testing facilities, and product manufacturing facilities to pay a $10,000 fee every 2 years. DPH is concerned that this difference in cost will result in a shift from medical marijuana production to recreational due to the lower fee structure. There is a difference in oversight and regulation due to the vulnerable nature of the medical marijuana patients, and DPH wants to ensure that patients have continued access to extensively tested marijuana products regardless of the availability of recreational marijuana. DPH would recommend increasing the recreational marijuana licensure fee to $20,000 to $30,000, with the understanding that recreational marijuana would be taxed, unlike medical marijuana. In addition, Delaware's compassion centers currently grow their marijuana exclusively indoors. Because of the state's rigorous testing requirements related to mold, fungus, and pesticides, growing marijuana indoors allows compassion centers to closely control the growing environment, which includes temperature and light. HB 305 would allow recreational marijuana to be grown outdoors, which poses potential health and safety risks. DPH recommends removing references to outdoor cultivation as it puts marijuana plants and product at risk of contamination from insects, wildlife, pesticides, cross-pollination, and other contaminants. Additionally, it's a greater security risk for marijuana to be grown outdoors, as evidenced by the Delaware Department of Agriculture's experiences with outdoor hemp cultivation. Thank you again for the time to speak.
Thank you. As a reminder, please keep your hand raised throughout the public comment period. It makes everything easier for staff. Olivia Noggle, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Benson, members of the committee. My name is Olivia Noggle, and I'm Senior Policy Analyst at the Marijuana Policy Project, or MPP. We're a national nonprofit based in DC, and we've been working to reform cannabis laws across the country for more than 25 years. I'm here today in support of HB 305. There are now 18 states and DC that have legalized cannabis for adult use, including red states like Montana, and including Delaware's neighbor, New Jersey. Delaware should follow suit by passing HB 305 this session. Even after Delaware decriminalized cannabis in 2015, cannabis laws continue to be unequally enforced. Black Delawareans are still 4 times as likely to be arrested for cannabis possession than their white counterparts. And as a result of this disparity, Black Delawareans are far more likely to be plagued with an arrest record and conviction for cannabis, which makes it harder to get jobs, housing, and education and other opportunities. HB 305 includes strong social equity provisions that would provide communities that have been disproportionately impacted by prohibition opportunity and ownership in the legal industry. It would also reinvest in these communities by allocating 7% of tax revenue from legal sales to a justice reinvestment fund. By passing HB 305 this year, the state will further reduce cannabis-related arrests and police interactions and begin to repair the decades of harm cannabis prohibition has caused, particularly in communities of color. A strong majority of Delawareans recognize cannabis prohibition has failed and support legalizing and regulating cannabis for adults 21 and older, but it's up to the General Assembly to bring equitable legalization to Delaware. It's long past due. I'd like to thank Representative Osinski for his continued leadership on this important legislation. Thank you, members of the committee, for your time today, and I respectfully urge a favorable report of HB 305.
Thank you. Lindsay Buffone, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Bentz and committee members. My name is Lindsay Buffone. I live in Newark, Delaware with my 3 girls and fiance, and today I come to you as a mother and an educator who consumes cannabis. A huge thank you to those of you who currently support this bill. For those who may not, I urge you to dig deeper, learn about the infinite ways this plant brings opportunity to our state, and despite what many may claim, bring Delaware citizens together. Many, if not all of you, support mental health in our state. I have witnessed firsthand how cannabis can be a mental health resource for many. Listen to the passion in our voices while we advocate for access to this plant, and more importantly, as we advocate for ourselves as not only consumers, but as people. After the 2020-2021 school year, I resigned from my position in education. While I dearly miss my students, coworkers, and community there, I am energized in knowing that I can now use my voice to fight for what is morally right and fair. I personally know Delawareans with careers in finance, education, medical, law, and other career people from throughout the state who are cannabis consumers like me. They believe in the real benefits this plant offers. Why should we be robbed of our liberties, judged, and live in fear of criminal prosecution and penalty? We are here everywhere you look, and we're tired of being forced to hide a secret life. According to a 2018 study from the University of Delaware, 61% of Delawareans support legalization, but those are only the people who speak up and admit to it. This bill is a step towards giving people their voices back. Until they can, I will use my voice for those who can't. We must educate ourselves and open our minds, and the stigma must end. I ask you to please vote yes and release HB 305, the Delaware Marijuana Control Act, from the House of Health and Human Development Committee, both today and yes again when it comes before you on the floor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Fred Calhoun, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fred Calhoun. I'm sure many of you already know my history. I have been down at the hall for many years. I am here today in the capacity of a citizen. I am not here in the capacity from which you are familiar, being the FOP representative or a member of law enforcement. I have retired and I am out of that work now. I will tell you that I got involved in this research for 2 reasons. One, while I was on the job, I researched it because of Chief Justice Strine. I was brought under the fold with Chief Justice when he wanted to do the reform of the code. While I didn't agree on everything with him, he did enlighten me. He did enlighten me to the impact it was having on underprivileged communities, individuals of color, the judicial system, the impact on law enforcement. And he kind of brought me around. You have to keep in mind that in the past, we were right is right and wrong is wrong. That's how we are trained. That's how we were raised. That's how we lived our lives in the prior business. But with that being said, when you sit down and you take an outside look at what's happening here, you realize that where the direction we're going, it is not accurate. Back in the 70s, there was a commission called the Schaefer Commission. I'll just do a quick blurb out of it. It says, unless present policy is redirected, we will perpetuate the same problems, tolerate the same social cost, and find ourselves as we do now, no further along the road to a rational, legal, and social approach than we were in 1914. This commission predicted that we would be in the position we were in, and we don't want history to repeat itself. I will say the only other reason I'm in this business at doing this is because I know the impact it can have on individuals. In 2014, my wife was involved in a horse accident. She's paralyzed from the chest down. It took her a long time and me a long time to come around to the idea that marijuana could be helpful. But through our research, I've learned that it could be helpful, and I've seen what it can do to people firsthand. I am hopeful that you will push forward with this piece of legislation. It will help more people than you can imagine, and it will change the way society functions. Okay, it is very similar to alcohol.
Thank you. Your 2 minutes have expired.
Yep.
Thomas Donovan, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz and distinguished members of the House Committee. My name is Tom Donovan. I am a resident of Dover, Delaware, and I've been an attorney licensed to practice law in Delaware for more than 20 years. My primary focus is indigent criminal defense. I represent poor people, and I've always represented poor people. Here to say that decriminalization doesn't work. Despite back in 2015, when the majority of Delawareans were telling the General Assembly that they supported legalization of cannabis, it appeared the General Assembly was taking a step in that direction by decriminalizing cannabis. However, something weird and strange happened. The number of police interactions with individuals possessing personal use amounts of marijuana increased. And not just by a little, by a lot, 100%. Prior to decriminalization, there was about 2,500 interactions between police and citizens of Delaware. Today, there's about 5,000 or more. What you'll hear later on from another speaker, if you don't already know, 80% of the people in the criminal justice system are indigent. 80% are represented by the Public Defender's Office, Office of Defense Services, and Conflicts of Defense. 80% of the people in the criminal justice system are poor. The war on drugs has failed. The war on drugs is a war on people, in particular, poor people. So that means of the 5,000 interactions, that means twice as many poor people were stopped, frisked, arrested, searched, handcuffed, and humiliated for possessing a substance that a majority of Delawareans believes should be legal. Poor people should not be bearing the cost and the brunt of cannabis prohibition. Poor people should not be quote unquote lucky to get a fine that they can't afford. Poor people should not be subject to drug court, to probation, to threats of violations, to going to jail for being unable to purchase a medical marijuana card for their condition. For consuming a substance that a majority
Thank you. Your 2 minutes are up. Joe Aronson, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you to Chairman Bentz and members of the committee for allowing me to provide comment on House Bill 305 on behalf of the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. In states that have legalized recreational cannabis use, legalization has substantially reduced the price of cannabis, increased its potency, and made it more available to adult users. These factors have resulted in increased adult cannabis use, as well as increases in emergency department admissions and hospitalizations for conditions related to or caused by cannabis use. Furthermore, the widespread availability and use of high-potency cannabis is associated with an increased likelihood of adverse reactions, particularly cannabis-induced psychosis. While this legislation limits the distribution of cannabis to those over 21, research shows that the human brain does not fully develop until a person is around 25 years old. There's ample neuroscientific evidence to suggest that youth and young adults may be uniquely susceptible to lasting damage from cannabis use until age 25, and that they experience harms beyond that of other adult users. To prepare for and mitigate the likely impact that legalization of recreational cannabis will have on Delaware's behavioral health system, the division recommends that a portion of the tax revenue collected under this bill be dedicated to cannabis and substance use disorder treatment programs and public awareness campaigns about the risks of cannabis use. The division also recommends requiring that cannabis products include a warning against their use by individuals with a history of mental illness or substance use disorder. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lizzie Golub, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz and members of the House and Human Development Committee. My name is Lizzie Golub. I live in Millsboro, Delaware. I am a retired teacher, a wife, mom of 3, and a cannabis consumer. I have been a medical cannabis patient in Delaware for 3 years. I advocate for the passing of this bill with my fellow Delaware Normal volunteers. I am asking that you please vote yes on HB 305. I choose to consume cannabis to relieve a multitude of conditions. After a car accident in 2009, I was on several pills that wreaked havoc on my body. When I was introduced to cannabis as a safer alternative, it changed my life. No longer was I feeling the many side effects pills caused me. Passing HB 305 will help ensure that patients' needs can be met by having a variety of supply and competition. Cannabis prohibition is only harming our communities, and research shows that it is mostly people of color. People are being locked up over having a small amount of a non-toxic plant on them. Cannabis has killed nobody. This is unjust, and by passing HB 305, we can change that. Money would be saved by stopping the unnecessary arrests and directing law enforcement to real crimes. Our neighbors in New Jersey and Virginia have legalized, and Delaware needs to be the next in the Mid-Atlantic to do so. This would bring many jobs to Delaware and help boost the economy. It would create a safe market for Delawareans to go to in our own state. Once again, I ask that you please vote yes on HB 305 to legalize cannabis in the first state today, and it comes to you on the House floor. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. Joy Strand, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I am Joy Strand. I am currently the Executive Vice President of Government Affairs for Greenleaf Medical, which is a multi-state medical cannabis operator in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. Our parent company is Columbia Care, which is a medical provider for cannabis in Delaware. I have been a healthcare executive for my entire career before entering the cannabis industry. And before joining G-Leaf, I was the executive director of the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, which is the regulator in Maryland for the cannabis program. And I speak to you today as a former regulator in support of House Bill 305. Looking at this from my regulatory perspective side of the brain, I urge you to look at regulatory simplification. A single regulator for medical and adult use in Delaware would help streamline operations and reduce expense. And often when there is bifurcation in regulatory operations across multiple agencies, it's inefficient. And we have seen this in other states with increased expense and delays and a lot of inefficiencies to point that out. One of the things that I did when I was with the Maryland Cannabis Commission was go through a round of licensing and applications. I would urge you to look at your licensing ratios and the number of licenses that you are looking at, as well as licensing fees. The way the bill is currently written, it looks to me like this would be a little bit of a regulatory nightmare with the accelerated time frame, the
Thank
low
you. Your 2 minutes are
application
up.
fees. Thank you.
David Nathan, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bentz and members of the committee. I speak to you as the founder and past president of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, or DFCR, in support of HB 305. DFCR is the nation's premier organization of prominent physicians dedicated to the legalization, taxation, and, above all, the effective regulation of cannabis for adults in the United States. As physicians, we believe cannabis should never have been made illegal for consenting adults. It's less harmful to adults than alcohol and tobacco, and the prohibition has done far more damage to our society than the adult use of cannabis itself. But let me be clear, as a physician of conscience who follows the evidence wherever it takes me, I do believe that cannabis can have negative health effects for at-risk populations. For example, as with alcohol and other drugs, heavy cannabis use can adversely affect brain development in minors. But cannabis prohibition for adults does not prevent underage use nor limit its availability. Ask your kids. For decades, preventive education reduced the rates of alcohol and tobacco use in minors, while underage cannabis use rose steadily despite its prohibition. When cannabis is against the law for everyone, the government sends the message that cannabis is dangerous for everyone, and teenagers know that's not true. By creating a legal distinction between cannabis used by adults and minors, we teach our children a respect for scientific evidence and the sanctity of the law that we want them to respect. And this may be why teen use has remained level or even decreased in legalized states. Even those who oppose legalization generally believe that cannabis should be decriminalized. But as Delaware has learned after years of decriminalization, this half measure is an inadequate substitute for legalization. Ladies and gentlemen, please understand that you aren't choosing between big cannabis or a drug-free America. Your decision is simply whether or not to regulate a non-lethal intoxicant that is already widely consumed throughout Delaware. I hope you will make the logical, ethical, and moral choice by voting to enact HB 305. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Joseph Fitzgerald, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Mr. Fitzgerald, you need to unmute.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Too much testimony today. Joe Fitzgerald here on behalf of the Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce. And just wanted to follow up on the written remarks we've submitted for the record. The Chamber is neutral on the question of whether or not recreational marijuana should be legal. Our only concern right now, or our chief concern, I should say, is that we preserve the employer's ability to prohibit marijuana use on the part of their employees in or out of work, and for safety reasons, et cetera, and that the bill does not unintentionally confer liability on employers who have taken every step possible to avoid marijuana use at work or use by employees. So we want to preserve the ability of employers to have a written policy prohibiting marijuana use, and again, want to avoid any unforeseen liability that might arise from legalization for employers. Otherwise, again, the chamber is neutral on the question of legality of recreational marijuana.
Thank you. Nico Brady, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nico Brady, representing the Delaware Department of Agriculture. As mentioned, the department highlighted concerns last year, some that have been addressed in HB 305, others I will reiterate. The department urges that marijuana be grown in indoor sites only with adequate security measures in place. The department cites that outdoor growing sites operated by licensed Delaware hemp producers have experienced violent threats and the theft of crops where individuals have mistaken the crop for marijuana. The risk of crops grown outdoors being visible and accessible to the public poses a legitimate threat. Hemp processing facilities are required to be registered with the Department of Agriculture. There is a concern about the feasibility of processing locations to process both marijuana crops and hemp crops and still maintain the integrity of the processed materials. To best protect the interests of licensed hemp producers as well as marijuana customers, a licensed marijuana cultivation facility, as defined in HB 305, that is processing, preparing, or testing marijuana should be required to establish protocols and have them approved to ensure that hemp and marijuana crops are not commingled should the facility handle both. Regarding regulatory authorities, aspects of cultivation and product sales of marijuana are currently regulated by the Department of Agriculture, and the transfer of regulatory authority to date or any mutual agreements with our department to maintain regulatory authority should be addressed, including Delaware's nursery law regarding nursery stock of plants, seed law, as well as the Federal Seed Act, pesticide use on crops intended for human consumption under the Delaware pesticide law, and as well as federal laws, and the weights and measures of any product where there is weighing or measure commercially establishing size, quantity, extent, area, or measurement, and the accuracy of those products is currently regulated by the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Walls, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Megan, we can't hear you. We'll come back to you in a minute here. Lyle Dykstra, you've been permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I am Reverend Dr. Lyle Dykstra, retired Presbyterian pastor, and I encourage the committee and the legislature to pass House Bill 305. It will end illegal trade, criminal activity that currently happens and will contribute significantly to safety in our streets. That's the benefit to one of the big benefits to our society. And it is just and fair to give this freedom to adults. There will also be economic benefit and a source of tax revenue. Representative Postles, your concerns had been on my mind years ago. I have put them aside because the issue can be the issues of education and awareness of the impact on the human body of this substance can be dealt with, I believe, far more effectively when it is made legal than when it is prohibited. And the comments of another of you on your committee who said, then make smoking, tobacco, and alcohol also illegal is logically accurate. As a pastor, while I'm now no longer in an installed position in a congregation, I will continue to encourage people I can influence to not be excessive in use of any substance that has an impact on our mental functioning. Thank you for listening to me. Please pass House Bill 305.
Thank you. Julie McIndoe, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Bentz and committee members. My name is Julie McIndoe, and I'm testifying on behalf of Delaware United. HB 305 makes sense. This bill will protect over 145,000 adult cannabis consumers from prosecution and save taxpayers millions of dollars annually in law enforcement and criminal justice costs. A dangerous illegal market will be replaced with an industry that offers consumer protections and rigorous safeguards to prevent sales to minors. Legalizing cannabis will generate millions in revenue that can be allocated to fund education, infrastructure, clean water, reentry programs, and other valuable services. This bill will create thousands of jobs in the cannabis industry and secondary sectors and keep Delaware economically competitive with New Jersey, DC, and other states in the region that have already or will soon legalize cannabis. We fully support the creation of a justice reinvestment fund, which will heal some of the wounds that have been created over decades of racist and unjust sentencing. We hope that there is extraordinarily strong oversight of those funds to ensure that they go to those communities most impacted by cannabis prohibition. Support for adult recreational marijuana has been growing for years in Delaware and across the country. Other states have successfully enacted policies for safe and legal cannabis, and it is time for us to do so here in the first state. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Packard, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. My name is Wayne Packard and I live in Newcastle. A little bit about myself. I'm a 36-year-old stay-at-home father to 2 amazing kids. I'm a full-time student at the University of Delaware, and I'm also a combat veteran. I served 3 combat deployments as an explosive ordnance disposal tech, where I earned my Master Explosive Ordnance Disposal badge, excuse me, and was awarded the Bronze Star. In the last 8 months, I have personally lost 7 friends to suicide. I'm standing here today because cannabis truly saved my life. It took a lot for me to ask for help with my mental health, but when I did, it was all prescriptions and outdated therapy. The VA gave me medication to help with my post-traumatic stress and physical issues. The drugs they gave me made me have thoughts of putting my head on a railroad track. I had those thoughts when I was driving my daughter to school and thinking about it all day, waiting to pick her up so I could drive past those railroad tracks and pick out the spot where I would lay down. After the meds, after the drugs from the VA, I didn't trust them anymore. That is the case with a lot of us veterans. We take a chance to get help and then we get results like I did. So we don't go back. Instead, we go to the bar and we ask our drinking buddy, hey, how do you get help? Well, they tell us, turn to pot. Unfortunately, the VA is not issuing us cannabis at this time. So we stick to alcohol, which obviously isn't helping. By legalizing cannabis in Delaware, you give veterans access to incredible medicine. If veterans like myself could walk into a safe, welcoming environment with people of similar backgrounds that could help us find the perfect medicine for us, this is exactly what we need. So please vote yes for HB 305. If you support veterans in Delaware, then you support cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Wirtschaffer, you've been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak in favor of House Bill 305. My name is Michael Wirtschafter. I am a veteran, a registered voter, a medicinal cannabis consumer in our state's program. That being said, I strongly support House Bill 305, and I hope we will sign this into legislation. Let me touch on 3 small points, 2 of which come directly from our governor's most recent State of the State address. He mentioned sustainable budget. With the legalization of this entire industry, and though some needs held and controlled, if done correctly, can generate $70 to $100 million annually, with an exponential growth of 1.8 to 2.3% annually, even with the competition from neighboring states. This will not solve all of our state's finances, but is a good step in the right direction. Also, with legalization, current assets, monies from taxes that we collect currently that go to law enforcement to chase this plant can be redirected to other programs in our state. That is a minimum of $23 million. Regarding jobs, it will create hundreds, if not thousands. I personally have a business plan almost 90% complete, and I'm waiting for legalization because I believe I can bring a manufacturing facility to this state that will rival every other state. Lastly, in regards to medicinal use, there are patients out there that still need access to cannabis. Their physicians won't sign off on their needs to access the state program. Legalization will give people the choice, the liberty, and the freedom to decide how to address their needs, their ailments. I got off of 8 opiate-based medications with this product. This plant has saved my life. I know it can do the same for others. I know that people want to follow the law, but they also don't want to poison their bodies with opiates any longer. Please release House Bill 305 from committee, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. John Yeomans, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning. My name is John Yeomans. I'm the director of the Division of Alcohol and Tobacco Enforcement. Good morning, Chairman Bentz and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. While DATE is recognized as a regulatory agency in HB 305, DATE will seek to enter into MOUs with the Departments of Agriculture and Public Health to ensure the proper level of expertise is leveraged in regulating recreational cannabis. The Departments of Agriculture and Public Health will seek positions independent of DATE's fiscal note. It is vital that these positions be filled to provide for a qualified regulatory enforcement model. Thank you.
Thank you. Will McVeigh, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Will McVeigh, and I'm the state chair of the Libertarian Party of Delaware. I first want to thank the committee members for their swift consideration of this bill. Efforts have been made over the course of the last 3 legislative sessions of the General Assembly, including this one to pass legislation to legalize cannabis. Every day this important legislation is delayed is another day that nonviolent individuals, especially in disadvantaged communities, continue to be persecuted for cannabis possession and use. Prior legislation claiming to decriminalize cannabis has done nothing of the sort, as arrests and illegal markets continue and proliferate. The broader war on drugs, and in particular the prohibition of cannabis, has been a failure from the start, and few issues constitute such a crucial nexus where so many societal problems can be resolved or at least improved by correcting one mistake. The Libertarian Party of Delaware has supported an end to cannabis prohibition since our inception. We believe that all people have the right to self-ownership and bodily autonomy, and that any harm caused by cannabis use is limited to the individual freely choosing to use it. For this reason alone, cannabis should not be prohibited by law. The financial cost of cannabis prohibition is a drain on taxpayer resources instead of a boon to economic growth in our state. The impact on Delaware communities, particularly communities already struggling against historical challenges of arrests, incarceration, and fines, is more actively harmful than cannabis itself. The impact on our constitutionally guaranteed civil rights, again disproportionately suffered by historically disadvantaged communities, whether it's the abuse of protections against unreasonable search and seizure or the confiscation of property without due process through civil asset forfeiture, cannot be dismissed. Members of this committee have raised the issue of safety and the damaging effects of cannabis use. It cannot be overemphasized that any harms caused by cannabis use are dwarfed by the damaging effects of cannabis prohibition. Cannabis is being used anyway. Any safety issues or damaging effects are endemic even under prohibition. By ending the criminal and civil penalties for cannabis, the harms that exist can be addressed more effectively without stigma and the negative externalities associated not with cannabis itself, but with the illegal market for it, and they will greatly be curtailed. Delaware Public Health is worried about the higher cost of medicinal licenses and will divert investment to casual use market, lower the fees for medicinal, don't raise them for anyone. Please endorse this bill with your full support, and please pass this legislation quickly. Time is of the essence, and the injustice is real and ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Nolan, you've been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Distinguished members of the committee, my name is Jim Nolan. I'm a speaker for Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I'm also a professor and chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at West Virginia University. Having served as a lieutenant with the Wilmington Police Department, I support regulating marijuana from a public health perspective and removing it from the purview of the criminal justice system. Like many in law enforcement, I've struggled over the prospect of marijuana legalization. I've been conditioned to think that marijuana has a high potential for abuse and no medical use. I've also worried that ending prohibition might send young people the wrong message, that marijuana is harmless, causing more youth to use and abuse. However, my firsthand experience as a Wilmington police officer and my police research as a sociologist have taught me that marijuana prohibition causes much more damage than the use of the drug. Our marijuana laws brew deep distrust of the police and the criminal justice system, breaking community relationships and increasing violence. Marijuana prohibition adds to violence in communities because it creates illegal markets. When a drug is illegal, we have no control over it. Anybody can sell it, meaning it can be easily sold to young people. Anyone can sell a substandard product that puts consumers' lives in danger. Consumers can be exposed to lethal drugs through their dealer who possibly sells more than just marijuana. Millions of dollars in drug profits reward people for living outside the law and winning new turf through violence. I'm grateful my former home state of Delaware is working on this issue and pushing HB 305 forward. This bill rights the wrongs of past by dedicating a percentage of marijuana tax revenues to help restore the individuals and communities most harmed. I hope that the legislature and governor will build a solid foundation for police community trust by legalizing and regulating marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you. John Alfredo, you've been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz, members of the committee. My name is John Alfredo, and I'm the Legislative and Communications Director for the Office of Defense Services. The ODS provides state-funded defense counsel for indigent defendants across Delaware. And as someone mentioned previously, we represent the vast majority of those folks. We also engage in numerous post-disposition activities to help people obtain a second chance and rid themselves of the collateral consequences associated with a criminal record. The ODS supports House Bill 305. Legalizing marijuana is long overdue. The criminalization of marijuana has had devastating consequences for communities of color who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. This legislation is the first step to righting those wrongs. Delaware should join the growing number of states that have embraced legalization and pass House Bill 305. It will create jobs, raise revenue, and ease the burden on an overworked criminal legal system. We ask that you release this bill from committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoe Patchell, you've been to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz and members of the House Health and Human Development Committee. My name is Zoe Patchell, and I'm co-founder and executive director of Delaware Cannabis Advocacy Network. We ask that you please vote yes on HB 305. The current policy of cannabis prohibition has done nothing to reduce the use, supply, or demand of cannabis in the state of Delaware. Not in the 9 years that we've been advocating for a safe legal market to protect consumers and to end arrests for cannabis, nor in the decades of costly enforcement before that. Before much of the debate in opposition to HB 305 is rooted in this false premise that cannabis doesn't exist in Delaware and ignorant of the fact that cannabis is grown, bought, sold, and consumed every single day in Delaware. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration reports that over 18% or approximately 150,000 Delaware adults admit to consuming cannabis. And now with 18 legal states, including our neighboring state, New Jersey, it's easier now than ever for those 150,000 consumers to obtain cannabis. HB 305 does not create something new, but rather it's common sense policy that sets the minimum age of sales at 21 and addresses the inherent harms to consumers, providers, and communities throughout Delaware that are caused by cannabis prohibition. Will you vote yes today to end the government overreach of arresting and penalizing and forcing adult consumers into treatment for a plant that research has proven safer than alcohol? Or will you vote no and continue to allow law enforcement time and resources to be diverted to interacting with otherwise law-abiding Delaware adults? Will you vote yes today to ensure that cannabis that is bought, sold, and consumed in Delaware is safe and adheres to consumer safety standards? Or will you vote no, potentially allowing another tainted vape public health crisis? Will you vote yes today to convert the current illicit market to a legal, thriving small business employment opportunities that will benefit communities throughout Delaware? Or will you vote no and allow this multi-million-dollar market to continue to operate in the shadows with all the same inherent dangers and harms and failures as alcohol prohibition? Please vote yes on HB 305. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Johnson, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Johnson, and I'm here representing the Delaware Department of Finance. While HB 305 addresses several of the Department of Finance's prior technical comments, the bill does not currently address important issues related to tax enforcement and the well-being of state employees charged with administering this bill. At present, the Delaware marijuana businesses will largely transact in cash. Unfortunately, this increases opportunities for tax fraud and recording of sales off the books, requiring that each sale of a marijuana or non-marijuana product be recorded, tracked, and available to tax authorities electronically will help mitigate these risks. The structure of HB 305's marijuana tax also creates legal and administrative issues unique to our state. For example, the bill does not specify whether sales tax collections may be reduced from gross receipts tax calculations and permit corporations ordinary and necessary business expense deductions without a parallel provision for LLCs, partnerships, or sole proprietors. This sales tax would be the first of its kind in Delaware and generate considerable administrative and audit requirements. Because those costs would be related to a small portion of Delaware's revenue, it will not be efficient to invest in costly sales tax monitoring software. As a result, the average audit of marijuana-related taxpayers across all Delaware taxes will require significantly more person hours. Marijuana is still federally designated as a Class 1 drug. Current federal banking and anti-money laundering laws continue to make it difficult for marijuana businesses to open bank accounts or access basic banking functions. It remains unclear if the state will be able to deposit marijuana tax proceeds with its existing banks or if the state treasurer will need to establish additional banking relationships. In either case, the cash nature of this industry means that marijuana business owners, employees, and customers and state employees become natural targets for theft and crime. The state will need to invest in appropriate security for our employees and any offices accepting large cash payments. It's also unclear whether association with Delaware's marijuana revenues will be deemed a violation of federal laws. So DOF continues to strongly recommend language in the law indemnifying and committing to defend any state employee involved in the regulation, administration, or enforcement of this statute. In summary, HB 305 needs to give more consideration to ensuring appropriate transparency, safety, and other protections for those involved in the administration of this act. Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Bradley, you were permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and committee members, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Alyssa Bradley. I am the coordinator for the Delaware Poor People's Campaign. We're one of 45 state chapters of the Poor People's Campaign across the nation, advocating for policies and that contribute to the cyclical nature of poverty, as well as lifting up the voices of those currently impacted by policies that keep them in a specific socioeconomic situation. We are here in support of Bill 305. We believe that, the social equity piece of this bill is not only landmark as it is the first in the nation, but it is also one of the most encouraging pieces of legislation that we've seen in a long time. This willingness to address the social inequities that have happened because of marijuana prohibition in the state of Delaware is amazing, and the authors of this bill should be giving themselves a huge pat on the back for that. It's been mentioned, the adverse effects of marijuana on society and all that has been mentioned, but quite frankly, law does not change behavior. People who are accessing marijuana now are still going to access it when it's legal. It's been said before, but what you really have here is the choice between continuing to prohibit marijuana and hold up an illegal enterprise and an illegal market, or bring it under the umbrella of the Delaware state government, make sure it's safe and regulated. And so we urge every single person here to vote yes to release House Bill 305 from committee. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Dustin Thompson, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Dustin Thompson with Delaware United. I don't want to repeat anything my colleague from our organization stated earlier, but I do just want to share a personal experience that I am a medical marijuana card holder. However, I understand why there are so many people that are not able to go through that process. Finding a doctor willing to go through that with you is extraordinarily difficult still. And then being able to afford the doctors that will go through that process with you is often completely cost prohibitive. I pay hundreds of dollars every time. I have to pay cash because they won't take any other form of payment for that visit, just to go through the process, just to get the paperwork filled out. And then you still have to pay the state, and then you have to pay higher costs in those limited markets that others have alluded to within the medical cannabis industry here in Delaware. So just to say that there are probably a lot of folks out there that would otherwise be a part of the medical marijuana program that for numerous reasons, in addition to the ones I've mentioned, are never going to be able to participate in that program. And so having this as, I don't want to say as an alternative, because they should be able to access those products that only you can get only through the medical cannabis program. I do think we need to fix those issues within the program, but also, opening up this this method of access to those that are already using, whether it's medicinal or recreational, is the right thing to do. As the last speaker just said, the laws aren't going to change the behaviors, but it can help right the wrongs of a historically unjust and racist system that was created specifically for racist purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As a reminder, once you already speak, you don't get another 2 minutes if you raise your hand again, so please keep your hands down. Megan Walls, you're permitted to speak. You have.
Good afternoon, Chairman Benz and honorable members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on HB 305. I'm Dr. Megan Walls, a pediatric psychologist testifying on behalf of Nemours Children's Health. Our focus today is the safety of the children and youth in the event that Delaware moves forward with recreational marijuana. We would first like to thank the bill sponsor for incorporating several important child safety measures in this new legislation. These include continually child-resistant packaging, clear and unobstructed font on products, and a warning label statement of risk to pregnant and breastfeeding mothers. We will continue to advocate for strengthened safety provisions, especially to those to mitigate against accidental ingestion for infants and children, and exposure to these products for developing adolescents. We will remain closely involved in the regulatory process should the bill pass and be vigilant about the following: that the grave lessons we learned from tobacco regulation, lifelong patterns of addiction, and appeal for youth are not lost here, that targeted custom promotional products in apparel or swag, such as hats, hoodies, or t-shirts are prohibited, and that individual edibles are imprinted with a universal warning symbol or a mark that to denote that they contain THC, and large sizes for multi-serving liquid THC products are avoided as new research continues to emerge and further validate previous findings that adverse events are higher in states that have legalized marijuana, particularly when market-driven innovations are increasing potency levels. Finally, we'd like to note that despite best intentions and statutory prohibitions, youth consumption of marijuana has increased in some states that have taken the step of legalization. Therefore, we recommend mitigation through the use of evidence-based prevention programs as an important step in further protecting our youth in Delaware. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Andrea Brown-Clark, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bentz and members of the committee. My name is Andrea Brown Clark, Townsend resident. I manage the Building People Power Economic Recovery campaign with the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League. I'm a coordinating committee chair with Delaware Poor People's Campaign, a newly appointed member of the state's African American Task Force Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, and I am the coalition coordinator for Delaware CAN, which to date consists of 25 plus organizations and leaders with cross-denominational faith communities throughout the state of Delaware. I ask that you please vote yes on HB 305. It is no longer okay to ignore the impact of social economic injustice. The time is now to address wellness, addiction, and economic concerns that have plagued our communities. The stigmas and the storylines which have been sold to us for generations have been diminished by the holistic benefits and medicinal results that have been realized from its consumers. I can personally share testimony, a direct correlation from a chronic pain after suffering in silence for 7 years due to a car accident in 2013, which left me with herniated disc and nerve damage. I made the decision on my own to become my own health advocate, and this was the best decision that I've ever made. You see, my doctors quickly prescribed opioids that I took initially because we were taught to follow physicians' advice. But as a wife of 24 years and a mother of two, now 18 and 22, I quickly realized that by no means was this fixing or curing my pain. Against their advice, I discontinued the usage and I did several colon cleanses to flush the pills out of my system. I was then told that outside of surgery, I had achieved my best recoverable self, which simply meant that I was going to have to learn how to live with the pain. There would be days, weeks, months, especially during the fall and the winter, where I would be tapped out of life and days activities, household chores, cooking, shopping, cleaning, laundry, etc., let alone being a wife and a mother, due to the chronic pain that I was suffering. I actually started referring to myself as a walking weather vane with a trick hip. If anyone has suffered through this pain, then you know exactly what I mean. Finally, I made the decision that I couldn't suffer one more year. In the summer of 2020, I decided to explore a new approach, and after much trepidation, I went through the evaluation process to become medically eligible for marijuana. For the first time since 2013, I had finally experienced relief. I then
Thank you.
wondered
Your
why
2 minutes are up. John Seibert, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes. Mr. Seibert, you need to unmute.
My name is John Seibert, and I'm a resident of the 38th District in Ocean View. I also work as a carpenter by trade. There's a myth circulating that the cannabis of today has higher THC levels than cannabis from past decades. The tired refrain that this is not your parents' weed is a false statement that did have cannabis that has been in the past. A 70 strain such as Pakalolo from Hawaii is 20% THC. In the post-Vietnam War era, hashish, which is 30% THC, was plentiful. Cannabis connoisseurs have always existed, even during the war on drugs. Many people like myself, who call ourselves fans of the musical group The Grateful Dead, have shared a unique experience. Our culture attracted cannabis connoisseurs for many generations, to which that supply has never dwindled, shortened, fallen, or slowed, because we are everywhere. Higher THC levels do not equate to unhealthy cannabis consumption. In fact, it will have the opposite effect. With an industry that will have strict consumer protections in the form of accurate labeling and warning labels, the consumer knows exactly what product they have purchased. THC, regardless of its potency, is non-toxic. In fact, the FDA lowered Marinol, a legally prescribed drug composed of 100% synthetic THC, from a Schedule II drug to a Schedule III drug due to its low abuse potential and safety record. Finally, not every cannabis consumer wants the same characteristics in their experience. Similar to alcohol per volume information at craft breweries, proper THC labeling and testing would afford a more informed choice. To delay the benefits of HB 305 and deny the freedom and liberty it represents should not be based on a myth. Please release HB 305 from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Javon Rich, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Bentz and committee members. My name is Javon Rich, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director at the ACLU of Delaware. The ACLU of Delaware supports HB 305 and urges committee members to release this bill from committee. For far too long, the failed war on drugs has devastated communities through arrests and mass incarceration, and much has remained unchanged in the past decade despite modest cannabis policy reforms such as decriminalization. Legalization of cannabis is a logical next step to truly stem the tide of drug arrests and put an end to the failed war on drugs policies. Legalization of cannabis is safe. A significant portion of cannabis arrests in Delaware is for possession only with no link to violence. Cannabis legalization is also a racial justice issue. According to ACLU's 2020 research report, Black Delawareans are over 4 times more likely than white people to be arrested for cannabis possession, even though Black and white people use cannabis at a similar rate. Delaware ranks 15th in the nation for largest racial disparities in arrests for cannabis possession. Cannabis prohibition has been used as a means of surveillance and social control. People in Black and brown communities have routinely been stopped, searched, and sent to jail for engaging in activities that white people participate in without similar consequences. It is encouraging that HB 305, in addition to legalization, ensures that people with prior drug convictions and their loved ones have access to benefit from the new legal cannabis marketplace after legalization. Delaware should do all that it can to ensure that the cost of obtaining the licenses is accessible. Furthermore, using the tax money raised by the legal cannabis market to support those directly impacted by the war on drugs is crucial, and I hope that the state continues to expand their restorative justice to those who need it the most. The ACLU requests that the committee members say yes to HB 305. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. John Evans, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Benson, committee members. Again, my name is John Evans, and I am the director of the Division of Forensic Science, which is the state crime lab here in Delaware. There are 4 disciplines within the Division of Forensic Science, including the Forensic Chemistry Unit, which will be one of the labs used for testing related to HB 305. The division does have concern with some of the current wording in the bill and with being asked to perform testing which is outside our current capabilities. With that said, however, we look forward to working with Representative Ozienski and his staff in the coming weeks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jacqueline Meyer-Lacey, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Meyer-Lacey. I am a 60-year-old Delaware native born in Wilmington and now living in Sussex County for over 25 years. I'm a mother, grandmother, and professional business owner. I'm here today to ask you to please vote yes on HB 305. Studies continue to show that cannabis is not a gateway to drugs. This herb has been proven to be an aid to help people who have struggled with heroin and opioid addictions and withdrawal symptoms. Overdose deaths are still occurring at all-time highs. There are not enough facilities to help with the real plague in our state. All of us need to stop looking the other way and focus on making Delaware grow toward being a state to live in, not just a place to come to retire and pass on, but one that offers industries and employment for our children and young adults. Our representatives continue to approve more homes, allow building permits and license for more breweries, and the freedom to take out drinks to go. Let's find another way to raise funds needed to improve our living condition. Interesting fact, there are more vacant, abandoned homes than there are homeless in our state. Our children need more hope for a better way of living. Thank you for giving me the time to speak, and please vote yes for HB 305. Thanks again.
Thank you. Nagiste Abebe, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nagista Bebe, and I am the Vice President of Public Policy at Columbia Care, one of the medical cannabis providers in Delaware. I also serve as the Vice Chair of the Public Health Advisory Council for Virginia's Cannabis Control Authority. I'm here today in support of legalization, expungement, and social equity licensing, especially when it comes to ending a policy that has disproportionately impacted communities of color. I commend this body for its efforts to center restorative justice with a specific funding stream. I am, however, concerned that HB 305 still falls short on addressing access to capital and ensuring uninterrupted patient access in the medical program. As currently written, this bill will disrupt the medical cannabis program that 14,000 patients in Delaware rely on. Without inclusion of the medical operators, half of whom are certified minority and veteran-owned businesses, patients will not see the cost savings that make this medicine, which is not covered by insurance, more accessible. Oregon once had hundreds of medical dispensaries, but did not include them in their transition to adult use, and now there's just one medical dispensary in the state. Adult use programs do not provide access to pediatric patients and would also subject patients to Delaware's first sales tax, further reducing affordability. As currently drafted, I'm also concerned that there's more to be done to ensure that this bill will achieve the legislature's stated goals for equity. There's no program for grants or loans to social equity licensees, and the study proposed in this bill will not ensure those funds are available by the time licensees are being awarded. Many other states are levying adult use license fees from their medical operators to seed grant funding for the legal market, including Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia, just to name a few. The existing industry should be seen as a resource in making the transition to adult use, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you on how we can play a role in this transition. The medical cannabis program has come a long way in ensuring consistent supply and reducing prices. Columbia Care even runs a program called Share Well Care Well to provide subsidies to patients who are on Medicaid or have other sources of financial need. But without inclusion in adult use, patients, and especially pediatric patients, will not see the benefits you've heard advocates.
Thank you. Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Lillian Turnahan, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Benz and committee members. My name is Lillian Turnahan. I am a longtime resident in Frankfort, Delaware. I am the organizer of the Delaware Patients Coalition. I am a small business owner and entrepreneur and recent graduate from Widener's Legal Studies program. But most importantly, I am a wife and wonderful mother to 2 children, and I support HB305. After several disheartening diagnoses and many follow-up opinions, I had to accept that I was suffering from PTSD. After trying numerous pharmaceuticals, many of which impaired and incapacitated me, I decided to speak to my therapist about medical cannabis, and due to his personal beliefs and stigma, denied me the opportunity of treatment with a plant that was ultimately life-changing. Had cannabis been legal, I wouldn't have had to jump through the hoops to obtain the proper medication reducing symptoms with PTSD that enabled me to take control of my life without the numerous negative side effects of the pharmaceuticals. Further, the measly list of qualifying conditions disregards the numerous therapeutic and pain relief benefits cannabis offers. For a plant that has been proven safer than acetaminophen, aspirin, and opioids, this is ludicrous. Cannabis should be available to those who desire relief for ailments such as menstrual cramps. The language within this bill promotes security to Delawareans currently utilizing medical dispensaries. It is imperative that licensed medical dispensaries with limited quantities of medical cannabis, which we've experienced in the past, would be depleted almost immediately in the event that the current medical dispensaries are granted priority licensing, making the new language much more suitable to us patients. I urge you to vote yes on HB 305 now and in the future.
Thank you. Emilio Nazario, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Benz and committee members. I ask that you please vote yes on HB 305. My name is Emilio Nazario Jr. I served in the United States Air Force for 26 years, taught at Dover High School, and was an adjunct professor at Delaware Technical and Community College. I have worked and been around young people for most of my career. One thing I know for sure is everyone makes mistakes, especially young people. It's because the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making is not fully developed. Young people struggle with many issues as they try to find their way. Issues such as financial burdens, family problems, career choices, dating, hormones, and peer pressure. An immature mind doesn't always make good choices when confronted with these issues. Many young people will be exposed to cannabis for the first time through a friend or family member. Because consuming cannabis is illegal, and many will consume it anyway, The state is sending many unnecessarily on a path into the criminal justice system. Let me be clear. I am not making excuses for inappropriate behavior. Everyone should be held accountable for their actions, but the punishment should fit the crime. If cannabis was regulated, similar to alcohol, young people would not have their lives disrupted and their future career aspirations hindered because they consumed cannabis. I am for cannabis legalization because I don't believe lives should be upended because of cannabis consumption. When someone legally consumes alcohol, as long as they are not putting anyone in danger, it is considered acceptable by the majority. Why should cannabis be any different? Decriminalization doesn't solve the problem. Possession-only court filings are up 127% since decriminalization in 2015. But more egregious is the fact that Blacks are arrested 4.2 more times than whites for similar rates of use. Delaware can do right by its residents by legalizing cannabis for adults 21 and older and erase the stigma that somehow cannabis consumers are bad people. In my opinion, alcohol is much
Thank you.
worse
Your
than
2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Rebecca Kidner, you're permitted to speak. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Kidner. I represent the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. That represents more than 1,200 insurers and reinsurers. And specifically in Delaware, our members write 40% of all private auto insurance and nearly 80% of all commercial auto and workers' compensation sold in Delaware. APCIA is not taking a position on the legalization of recreational marijuana, but our key focus is on safety, and specifically as it relates to auto safety and workplace safety. And to that end, APCIA fully supports the employer's rights to enforce a drug-free workplace. We noticed that in HB 305, a key section 1305, related to places of employment was removed. And we're actually asking that that be reinstated. The language makes it clear that this act will not supersede an employer's right to require a drug-free workplace, nor supersede an employer's ability to discipline those employees who are working while they are under the influence. Without that section 1305 language, employers would only be left with the current section 1308, which deals with private property rights. And while this section would allow employers to prohibit possession or consumption on their property, section 1308 would not address disciplining employees for possession or consumption or being under the influence at work if consumed on or off the premises. So we think that that's important. Another point of clarification is that APCIA is concerned about the use of marijuana while operating a vehicle. And so specifically in section 1303, we're requesting that a very, very small amendment make it clear that marijuana and marijuana accessories must be in a vehicle, must be in a container and not readily accessible to the occupants. For clarity, I am happy to submit the exact language that we're requesting to the committee in writing following the comments. And we look forward to working with you, Representative Osensky, and others on the language in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody who joined us here today and provided their thoughts on the bill. I'm going to ask quickly that the members turn on their cameras if they could, and I will check in with Representative Osensky and see if he has any final thoughts for us for considering a motion from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank everybody who came to this committee meeting to speak, and for the state agencies that have brought their concerns to our attention. As I mentioned in the beginning, I am committed, and these agencies will be receiving an email from us to set up a meeting to discuss these concerns. I must say we've been keeping track, and there was more public comments addressing concerns with the medical program here in Delaware that Delaware Division of Public Health oversees. And we're committed to, or I am personally, after meeting with many of these compassion center owners, to try to address those needs to improve patient access. And the last couple comments that was addressed by the insurance industry, that language from 1305 was removed per the request of the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. So I guess we're going to have to get those two groups together to discuss if they want that language back in or out. But you have two business industries that have different feelings about that language. So as we know, if I can close out, recently, we have 18 states. That's actually 4 more states since we last met last year that have legalized. Regardless of any action this committee or the General Assembly takes on this legislation, recreational marijuana will soon be available for legal purchase to any Delawarean willing to make the short drive over the border to one of our 3 neighboring states. So I do encourage my colleagues to release this from the committee so we can move on and get this onto the House floor. But thank you again for your time and your consideration.
Thanks, Representative. I have Representative Kowalko.
I'd like to make a motion to release, please.
Motion, is there a second? Second from Representative Bomback. We'll now move on to the roll call. Representative Benz, yes. Representative Minor Brown.
Representative Minor Brown voting yes.
Representative Trafocha. Representative Trafocha. You can see him there. Is that a yes, a head nod? I'd like you to verbalize it if possible, Representative. Representative Johnson?
Yes, voting yes. Representative Johnson.
Representative Bomback?
Yes.
Representative Heffernan?
Representative Heffernan, Mark present, voting yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Representative Trafocha?
All right, you guys go do what you gotta do. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
I'm trying.
Representative Trafocha, we got you. You're on.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
We can hear you. We're doing the roll call, Representative.
Okay. Motion to, yes.
Yes, okay.
Sorry, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Where was I? I think Representative Morrison?
Voting yes.
Representative Kowalko?
Yes.
Representative Lynn?
Representative Lynn voting yes.
Representative Postles?
Postles voting no.
Representative Shoup?
No.
Representative Smith?
Yes.
Representative Briggs King? Absent. Representative Hensley?
No.
Representative Collins?
No.
Having received the required number of votes, the motion carries. The bill will be released. The legislative fellow will be sending an email shortly. All members with the list of bills released from committee after this meeting, please make sure that you forward your FMUs for each bill to the Chief Clerk, Rich Puffer, as soon as possible. Now that we have concluded the agenda for today, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. The committee is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.